Hey everyone, welcome to our live stream. And hopefully this time I got it right. This is our second live stream on the Tech and Real Estate podcast. So I'm going to open up comments here just to make sure I could see folks that are coming in. Which you see there's a couple of folks already. So let me just check that. There we go. Now I can see the chat. All right. And I'm going to just move it over to YouTube. If you don't mind entering where you're coming in from, that will help just to make sure that I know that this is working currently. But as that is happening, I'm going to share my screen here and dive into our topic. So today, let me make this a little bit bigger where you could still see my screen. Awesome. So we're going to be going into a live deal analysis. One of the biggest questions I hear each of you ask. And before we do, we're going to cover a little bit of what's going on today, the main topic, Q&A, and then what is coming for the future as well. So I really want this to be interactive. I'll pause along the way so that I can make sure you're understanding each topic. And if you want to add properties towards the middle of this live stream, we can do some live instantly as well. And I see folks are coming in from Bay Area, Los Angeles, Tampa as well. Awesome. Love to see it. So let's get right into it. So what is going on in my world? Of course, always many different things as we all have going on. But some things really exciting that we have is now nationwide data for coffee closers for sale by owner. This was a really interesting task to work on, as most people think it's just kind of downloading data and then showing it on a screen. But for those that are tech geeks like me, there's a lot of things that go on, like creating new databases, streaming large sets of data from nationwide sources. So this was a fun problem that now we've been able to solve. So you can check that out on our site. As well, a lot of you asked that even though having long-term rental data is useful, you really want to understand how you can try to make some of these deals work in other ways. So for example, medium-term rentals for student housing, nursing, etc. So we have partnered with Scrape Peak, which they're a web scraper we've worked with in the past. And we now have an API for medium-term rentals from Furnish Finder. So that video was this week in case you wanted to check it out. And personally, myself, I spent the last 2.5 weeks in Colombia. I'm now back in Tampa. Had an amazing time. It was a lot of great food, a lot of walking, a lot of sightseeing. And I wasn't as used to the high altitude. Coming from Tampa, everything is super flat. Going like 5,000 feet plus in altitude was definitely a change, but was able to do some hikes in between, so that was fun. All right, so starting off, we're going to go over one of the properties that was actually submitted by one of you, which if you guys checked it out previously, I did have a link last week for live deal analysis if you wanted to enter in a property that I can go into, but we can also dive into some midway here. But this was one that Terry, thanks Terry, added to the list, and it's a property in Orlando. So we're going to go over like how would we actually screen this property quickly using data. So for those who are coming more from newbie experience, for investing, there's several steps that are pretty repetitive. When it comes to starting your journey, it starts with goal setting, then you go into finding your market, which we've covered in previous webinars, property search, how to set up your buy box, and then today's focus is going to be the property screening, because you may hear you have to analyze hundreds of deals before you become an expert. I'm going to tell you that's actually not true. If you just have some of these steps that we're going to follow in mind, kind of like a road path, you can kind of go from analyzing maybe just 10 to 15 deals in your market and already be very in tune with the type of properties you're looking at. And then lastly, offer generation, which we're not going to cover here, but just wanted to show you those 5 steps. So for property screening, there are four main pieces. I see almost everyone get hung up just on that first piece, which is property financials. Super important, right? We need to know, will this property make money? Not going to put 10K into a property and then it's just a money pit at the end of the day. But there's a lot of other things that we need to consider, like how can we add value to the property? What risks can come with the property? And ultimately, are there additional hold or exit strategies that come with it as well? So we're going to dive through each of these four quadrants, and you're going to see how I mentally start to fill each of these out. And feel free to ask questions as we go along as well. So I'm going to start off with pulling this property where most of us first start, which is Zillow. Zillow has listings on market, so we can see new properties that are coming on. This particular property has been on the market for about 20 days, already pending, which we'll note why this is important in just a moment. If we look at this property, it looks to be either single family or small multifamily, possibly multifamily with these two doors. Looks to be in pretty good condition, possibly a fresh turnkey, and looks to be one single story. What's really awesome as I go through the photos as well is this part. So from the view of this property, we can see that Orlando, downtown Orlando, isn't too far away, which will also help in our analysis. But some things to note as well, this is a 4-bed, 2-bath, about 1,600 square feet, which is a little bit small for a 4-bedroom for my taste, but because what we see here, it is a duplex, it's actually not a bad thing. And we could see a little more information, has privacy for a fenced backyard, close to Advent Health in the College Park Business District, which I personally don't know much about, but assuming this is pretty good, commuting to I-4, 408. I love, love, love areas that you can get onto interstates really quickly. Most people don't know this. One of the reasons why I'm actually like kind of obsessed with this is because when I grew up, I was a half hour away from the main New Jersey Parkway. So getting like to and from places in New Jersey was a pain. So I know firsthand why a lot of tenants as well would want to be close to these major highways. So one of the next things that I usually do, this, brief the property quickly, look at photos, is I usually look for rent because I want to just do like a quick estimate of how much I could rent this property for. But we could see from this property is actually no rent values, which can be typical for some of these properties that we see on Zillow. Usually for like high densely populated areas, like in Orlando, we would see rent values. But because it is a duplex, maybe there's not that many of this property type, and that's why we're not seeing it. But what we would do next is start to look for these rent values because we want to understand income. So I'm going to shift here. And this is probably the way most of you know how to or have been introduced to going about the financial aspect of a property is starting to plug numbers into a spreadsheet. That's one that I started with as well when I was analyzing deals towards the latter half of 2018. However, we have progressed in the last 6 years where just like for stocks, like right now I have Apple pulled up, when we're trying to invest in stocks, we're not pulling all this information. I'm not creating a Python script to go get information on historicals or what the news articles are for Apple. I just want to have all the information there so I can quickly start to make my analysis. So not data gathering, more analysis. So that's why for tools like Coffee Closers, you can plug in an address and then quickly get the financials. But this is not a Coffee Closers ad, so we're just going to go right into whether you use this tool or another one. Once you plug in a property in 10 seconds, you have your values, what you would do next. So here I already have this plugged in just because I wanted to speed through this first deal pretty quickly. We can see the same address, images. Now we do see a breakout. So we do read property descriptions. So we could see for a duplex, for example, what the breakout is for bedrooms and bathrooms. So I could see this is a duplex, 2 beds, 1 bath, about 800 square feet. Again, a little bit tight for my liking. but it's not a deal breaker if most of the multifamilies are similar in this way. So first thing is rents. So we pull in rent values from RentCast for multifamily. We can go to these rental values here. So when I am looking at rental values, so how much can I actually make for rent or income per month? I'm not going to go through every single comp. I only do that if I'm under contract. What I'm doing right now is just a property screen, initially seeing like, should I even waste my time or continue on with this property? So I could see here that there's rental comps, and it looks like they have high similarity. So what I would do next is usually pull one of these comps. So what I did is I already took that step, or actually, yeah, I think I did in this tab. Yep. So at this stage, I usually pull a comp in two places, on Zillow, and I usually pull it on apartments. Now I'll explain why. So this comp that I just pulled, 35 East Bruce Street, that came from that table, looks very similar to that property that we are contemplating on putting an offer down for. It has that long driveway as well, with the carport, and looks to be in a similar type of neighborhood. So might even be down the street. But Zillow removes the rentals after they've been rented. So that's why if you use like apartments.com, or maybe it wasn't listed on Zillow, but apartments.com is usually where you could find each of these. And here we could see that this was that duplex. One of the units was rented out, 2 bed, 1 bath, 800 square feet. So about the same as that other property. Probably, if I had to assume, was built at the same time, probably by the same developer. And this is rented out for, what's the price here? I think it was 1,200 or so. No. Well, it was about 1,600. Okay. And if we look at these photos, they look pretty similar as well. So at this stage, what I usually do as quickly screening a property, I haven't gone under contract or anything yet. I say to myself, okay, that looks like a good comp. I could likely trust these comps. And now what does my cash flow look like? So our estimate is 1620 per unit. So I'm going to go with that for now. And then we have some expenses in our monthly costs. So based on today's interest rates, what the mortgage would be, property taxes, etc. But the main thing here is that this deal does not cash flow. If we see, cash on cash is negative 5%. So right now, you may be thinking, well, then this is a bad deal. This sucks, right? Not necessarily. That's just the first part of our analysis. I usually would still look at this deal solely because of the location and because the cash on cash is within like -0 to -10%. So in my head, I'm thinking if there's some things I can do with this property, I could likely get that positive. So what we just did is walk through the financials. And there's 3 things that I just walked through within a 5-minute time frame, which is trying to understand the income, the expenses, and the one thing I didn't touch on as much, which I'll do now, is the acquisition and lowball opportunity. So for every property, we kind of want to know, like, this price that was set, is there a way we can kind of go down on this price? So that includes looking at comps, but also looking at information of the owner. So from this property owner, we could see they've owned the home for 5 years, which I'm looking at down here. They have decent amount of equity in their property, and there's nothing showing us that they are in distress. So, and they've only had the property for 20 days, right? So the property hasn't been on market that long. Usually you can make lowball offers when the property has been extended like over 30, 60, 90 days because the homeowner's thinking, I need to get this off. I want to sell even if I go down on price. So Sally's probably not motivated to sell based on days. Doesn't look like she's in distress where there's vacancy or absent from the property. So that's probably not a go. So from my notes, mentally, I think, all right, the price is kind of high. I might have to jump more into comps to see if I can negotiate in that way because it doesn't look like there's any clear indicators that she would want to go down on the offer. So, looking at comps for sales, I actually didn't know this. Maybe you guys already know this, but I was looking at different sites. Realtor actually has a map where they have for that property. You could put in any property and go towards the end. You could see the estimate of all other properties in that area. So imagine like Zestimate, but plotted, which is really cool. So I typed in the property, I went to Realtor, I went towards the bottom, and then I saw this. Excuse me. So here we could see the property where it sits and then the estimated values around it. We could also dive into some other home values to decide, is this property overvalued or not? But you know what? For right now, I don't want us to get too caught up on that so that we can also analyze some other deals too. So let's just take this for what it is. Where do you get distress vacancy details from? Great questions. Distress comes from Real Estate API, which gets data from the county. So Real Estate API. They provide information on properties like lot information, county records, owners, as well as loans. So we get data from them as well for vacancy details. This comes from apartments lists. So you can get vacancy from the US Census, but it's outdated typically by 1 to 2 years, which the latest right now is for 2022. The next one comes out in about like 2 months or so. And down here, you can get vacancy rates that are actually like present. So what does the vacancy look like for this city or the zip code as of the last month or so? So a lot more recent. Yeah, thank you for that question. And now moving on to the next one, value add opportunities. So we just covered that this deal doesn't really work by the numbers. So what else can we do to make this deal work? This kind of involves starting to look at the photos a little bit more, and it comes a little bit easier with experience. But from what we could see, if you look just at this main photo, what's one of the things that stands out? The parking is large. There's a huge driveway, even a carport down here. And we had the CEO of this company a while ago, maybe like a year ago, but there's a company called Neighbor, and you can actually charge to rent out parts of your property. So, for example, say someone who lives in an HOA community and they have a nice boat. The HOA community is going to yell at them, you can't have your boat here. It's not part of the rules. But maybe putting their boat in a marina will cost hundreds of dollars. So, what's the happy medium? Well, if you live down the road from them, you don't have HOA fees, you can let them put their boat on your land and charge them maybe half the cost of the marina. So people are doing this all throughout the country, whether it's vehicles, trailers, RV camps, etc. So this is something that I like about this property that I see. There's extra space. Whether I do it or not, I know there's potentially an avenue where I can add extra income, maybe $200 a month, by renting out part of this driveway. So for additional space, I'd add that. Usually I look for extra bedrooms that we could add. Can't do that here because the units are pretty small. And when it comes to improvements, there's not really much we need to improve or can improve. Which is a good thing too, because it's turnkey, it's ready to go. So for someone who, like me, who's a working professional, I'm not trying to manage a construction crew at this time. So this is a positive from my investment perspective. All right, next, potential risks. So a lot of investors I see who regret their investment strategy or they hate the property that they chose is because they don't look at these other aspects. What climate risks are there? Are you willing to face these? Is there any structural issues that you should really walk away from? and the location. Is it in a super busy area that's going to be so loud no one can work from home? These are all things that need to be considered aside from just the financials. So when it comes to these potential risks, what I usually do is start to look at the street view, which is where you really get your detective hat on. It's really fun. So I already clicked the street view here, and this is where the property is. Don't know much about Orlando, but let's just zoom out for those who also aren't familiar. So we have Florida here, this last part of tip of the East Coast. Then we have Miami towards the bottom, Tampa, which is where I am, and in Central Florida, Orlando, which is commonly known as Mickey Mouse's home as well. So here we could see that this property looks to be kind of smack dab in the middle of Orlando, which is good. Now, when I do this first zoom, I'm zooming out as you see, I look for gray areas. Gray area up here, gray area here, gray area there. These gray areas usually signal two things, which is a military base or an airport. Both are fantastic to be close to for long-term rentals, as well as short-term. And if you could do military, even better. They're amazing, amazing tenants. So here, this property looks to be really close to Orlando Airport. So I like that already. Now I'm starting to go in a little bit more. So I just did 2 clicks for zoom. We could see that there's a lot of highways here. So we have I-4, which my knowledge of being close to this area, I know that I-4 is kind of the main highway of how to get to and from west and east coast of Florida. So this is good that it's by it. If I zoom in a little bit more, my one concern would be like, all right, it is 7 like streets away. Is it too loud? Like, could you hear all the cars rushing at night? That's a little bit concerning, but nothing to like stop me at this stage. I could see on the right-hand side, there's a hospital. These are usually shaded in pink. So if we just go back, zoom out a little bit, you can't really see them as well when you're zoomed out. This one you can kind of see, but hospitals are also good because you could possibly do medium-term rentals. I see we have some folks from Orlando. So that is old, but very good area. Awesome. And hey, Mark from Hawaii. Great to see you. So as we go more in now, some things I do try to look for is convenience. Practically everyone has shifted their preferences in the world and they want to be close to things. So I do look for like restaurants, bars, as well as like Wawas for the East Coasters. I don't see too much right next to the property because I think this is more residential. But on the left-hand side, there seems to be a street that has things close to it, which is great. All right, I know I'm diving a lot into location, but let's kind of fast forward this here. And the last step is usually just dropping the little man and looking at this property. Thank you, Prime Truck, for killing my view right now, but we'll get around it. So if we go here, there we go. Yeah, the Prime Truck, I think, kind of demolished our view, but we still get a little bit of a landscape of what this property looks like with boots on the ground. Important to note, we could see here that Google Maps is from May of 2022. I like to see in the last 6 months. Unfortunately, we don't see that, but it's not overly outdated. Like I've seen maps from 2017 that show up today. So this is not bad, but what I'm looking for is the space between the different properties. Looks like there's some privacy between neighbor 1 and neighbor 2. I look to see if there's a ton of people like leaving trash, or if there's a lot of like old cars on folks like their driveway right in front of their house, which doesn't seem to be the case. This is actually a really well manicured neighborhood. So I really like this. And we have some comments as well as some tips. So yeah, you can look at older dates. Just be wary that it may not reflect potential issues if you're like boots on the ground. And oh yeah, I think you're right. You're right. So actually looking at the older dates here, see more. There we go. Thank you. And yeah, 2019, we could see a little more of the property. Uh, trees. Trees are concerning at times. Luckily, Orlando isn't a hurricane-prone area, so you don't have to worry too much of those branches coming down. But yeah, this is awesome. So you can see like in 2018, even like the face of this property was pretty different, and it's kind of gotten a makeover since then. All right. So potential risks, we just went through location. I kind of did both of these at the same time, so sorry about that. Let's cover the right-hand side first. So when we were going and zooming out, we saw we had an airport, there was a hospital, and this is called College Park District, I think, or neighborhood. So in my head, I start to think, oh, there's potentially other options. I can maybe do a short-term rental, medium-term rental, student housing, aside from long-term rental, which is a good thing. Then for potential risks, we saw the neighborhood that it looks pretty quiet, which is good. Structural, I am not a structural engineer. However, I've been told as I go through inspections in the past of my life that they have told me, I'll go back here, always try to look for vertical lines in the foundation. So like if there was a vertical line in the walls or anywhere outside, because that could be really bad damage. Now this is newly painted, so we probably wouldn't see any of that. But nothing is like glaringly bad with this property. So structural, I put first pass looks fine, and then flooding, which is always a concern in Florida. So if we get out of here, we could see, although there's no huge bodies of water, we're many miles away from the right-hand side, we could see there's some lakes. And if we go to FEMA, we could see this is not in a flood zone. So kind of sped through that fast. But overall, there is not any major climate issues that I see with this property initially. Awesome. So we just walked through are the 4 steps of analyzing a deal. And even though this took us in total about 25 minutes, as you get more in depth of your own location that you're looking at, as well as your buy box, this becomes all mental and usually takes less than 5 minutes. Going through financials, value add, risks, hold, and exit strategies. So I have this part as well that I always like to think at the end, usually mentally, for each of these properties. For this particular deal, would I categorize this as newbie friendly? 100% yes. It's turnkey. The cash on cash, or sorry, not the cash on cash. It's turnkey, and as a house hack, most of your expenses would be covered. So I do really like this as a newbie deal. Not too much work. As well, holding it over time, likely those rents would rise. Then going into, is this deal worth making an offer? I think it is, which clearly someone else has thought so as well. If we go, yeah, this is pending in 20 days. So clearly it's in demand. I probably wouldn't have paid as at the market rate, to be honest. I would have lowballed a little bit more, but definitely a deal worth making an offer on. A lot of potential strategies that you could do aside from long-term rental. Would I invest in it? I actually would invest in this type of deal. I like it. Small multifamily, good neighborhood, and has a lot of upside potential, especially being close to downtown in Orlando. So with that, would love to answer some more questions either about this deal, or if you like, we can go into a whole other property. I prefer it to be on market just because there's usually more photos, more I can go with. But yeah, feel free to enter and address below. And while an address comes through, I will also show another tip. A lot of people don't know about this, but if you wanted to look at rental comps as well, Zillow has how much should I charge for rent, which is pretty neat. So this property, if I typed it in, it's not going to be, actually, I think if I put 1 unit or unit 1, it might work. it's not as good for multifamily. So let me just put regular property. That's a single family. Osborne, Tampa, Florida. So if you want to look at rental comps for free, you could use Zillow Rental Manager. You type in a property, gives you the median rent, shows you all these different values or comps for this property. And you could use a really neat slider where you can go towards the right, see properties that are estimated to be higher, what features they have that maybe you're missing, or what upgrades they have, as well as lower too. So free tool, easy to use. And I actually use Zillow for listing my properties as well, because they've really improved every year with their features, but they are horrible at customer service. I don't understand why. So it's a give and take, but it is free to use and to post. Welcome, Pittsburgh and Seattle. And Ravi asks, do we also check out any potential development projects coming in the area we are buying? Like there will be, oh yes, the pickleball court example. So yes, that falls into a little bit before the property analysis, going into market research. And I have something that I could show you actually. So let me open up ChatGPT. So while I was in Colombia, of course, I can't fully turn my brain off. It is what it is. So I got inspired by my recent conversation with Adam that I posted earlier this week on how to prompt GPT. So I'm going to copy this here, and I'll look for a way to send this out to each of you. Maybe I'll put it in the comments. But essentially, a lot of people use ChatGPT to ask simple questions like, what is population of Tampa? Where should, or what does rental income mean? But the way you should really be using GPTs is by giving it a role. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to walk through what I mean here. And this should hopefully answer your question, Robbie. Actually, it's the other one. So I was trying to play around with what types of prompts to ask that could help with speeding up market research. So I'm pasting this here. And this is what I'm telling ChatGPT, which you could use for any other LLM you like to use. I'm saying, please act as a real estate market specialist. Your role is to search local news articles in a market, whether it's a county, city, or zip code that I give you, to provide me economic and market trends. The audience is real estate investors. They review 10 plus markets in one sitting. So because they review so many markets, they need to digest this information quickly. They also require you to source where you get your data. Here's the structure of your report. And then I basically tell it where to go to get some information, how to structure it. And let's do Orlando, Florida, since we just covered this. So I'm going to type in Orlando, Florida. And now, just by copying and pasting, setting this up once, I'm going to get an in-depth market research report. Great. So now we get information, which I told it to basically go to Redfin. So Redfin, Orlando, Florida. I think it's, what did I tell it? Housing market. Sorry, I do not have my keyboard next to me while I'm doing this, so it's a little bit tricky. But if I click this, Redfin has all these stats that are current about housing market, including migration trends. But I don't want to have to click into Redfin each and every time, right? So I could just kind of direct ChatGPT or whatever my assistant is at this point on where to look for some of these stats. So I could see median sale price, median days on market. I asked it to tell me top employers, attractions, schools, universities, any risk, and then new developments, which I think I need to still tweak this a little bit because, Ravi, I wanted to have a little bit more of like what new projects are coming, not just like housing developments. So this is still in progress, but a great way to kind of speed up your market research. Awesome. We have some more questions. Are there other websites for garage rental? To be honest, I probably yes. I'm not exactly sure. I've only really been introduced to Neighbor. I assume you could even do like Craigslist too or Facebook for this, but they have a pretty seamless site, and you could actually sign up for free, put in an address. Like, say if there's just a lot you're interested in, you want to buy the lot for 10 grand and you want to just rent out that lot so you can make cash flow and eventually build something new on top of it. You could sign up, put in the address for the lot, and then visually you could actually see, like, you'll click a button for cars, RVs, or a mix, and you could see how many you can actually fit with estimated cash flow. So it's really, really cool way just to even like research what could be possible before actually having the property ready. Awesome. And I see we also have an address to analyze. So let's do it. I'm going to copy this address here. And we'll follow similar steps. So it's first just search this property in Zillow, which I think I didn't copy it correctly. So I'll type it in 5003 Tristan Ave Baker, LA. Oh, LA? Yeah, Louisiana. Perfect. All right. So this property is for sale and it's about 155K. Looks like it's been on the market for 90 days, which I see towards the bottom here. So about 3 months. And it has a price cut of about, this looks what, like 45 days ago. And if we see, it's had 195 views, 6 saves. That's a horrible ratio. I don't have the exact ratio of what you want to look at. It really depends on the market. But usually from what I've seen, like I would say, yeah, like 5% to 10%, with 10% being like a little bit more the average of saves if it's a good property. And I could tell you that it probably is that a lot of folks looking at this, they aren't investors and they actually want to move in the property. And maybe they're seeing things about the property they don't like for living. If we look at it, it doesn't even look bad though. Like it just is a little bit dated. So if we see here, the lawn could be upkept a little bit more, has a pretty nice open space for the living room. Flooring looks pretty good. Cabinets, people love the white cabinets, but that could just be a paint job. And yeah, not sure what the circles are here, but nothing that's not easily fixable. Now, roof, maybe that the roof is old. So I'm going to jump back out, go back to the listing. 3 beds, 2 baths, about 1,400 square feet. This is good. That's about right for a 3 bed, 2 bath, where likely each of the bedrooms are fair size. No Zestimate. Come here, check out this home, little 1 street subdivision in Baker. Ooh, looks like there's like maybe this is the Mississippi River, not sure. Let's see if we can expand out on this. Oh, I love that it's like at the end of a street here. That is nice. Maybe there's people who come to this park. What is the major city that's here? The nearest city or area is Baton Rouge, which is New Orleans. Okay, not too far off. Maybe a bachelorette party who wants to be remote if we were doing short-term rental. But yeah, let's plug this in to start to get financials now. So I'm going to copy this, bring it into Quick Report. As a background, if you don't know what our Quick Report does, basically gathers information for multiple sites, brings it into one view so that you don't have to have 20 different tabs open. But it is a property screening tool. So of course, boots on the ground, having an agent, those are always preferred so that at the end, when you're trying to make an offer or trying to decide to move forward with a deal, you can see. So this property was not found, which I could dive into this error in a moment, but I think it's because I'm running a significant job right now with data, doing a big data update. So what I will do here is try one last time to see if this property goes in. But if not, then it's likely that data job that I'm running. Yeah, it's probably like this data job I'm running, which sucks, but good to note. This is the fun part about being a developer, right? It's like now I could spend the next half hour after this live figuring out why that didn't work. But we can now pivot, go over to here. So we need to find the rent value at the minimum. So if we go to rent, again, this seems to be a rule, so we don't have a lot of information on rent, but we can plug this property into that free tool that I mentioned. So if we go to here, paste it, what I want is just a quick assessment of, does this deal look like it could be profitable, right, from day one? So there's a couple of properties in the area, and none of them that are like on the same street, 1.1 miles away, 0.6 miles away. This one is also a 3-bed, 2-bath, about the same square foot, same amount of square feet, off-street parking, which I think we have on-street parking. But let's actually look at this property here. Looks to be somewhat similar. So what I like about this is for the bedrooms and the flooring themselves, it looks very similar to our property, meaning that we probably don't need that much work, right? So the level of work always depends on like what comparables are within the area. So in this case, if I did rent this property for $1,400, which looks like the price is around, I don't know why it says, oh yeah, here. The price is probably around $1,371. I'd agree with that. The property is going for what price? Here we had it. So it's almost a 1% rule, meaning that 1% of the property is the rent. So this property likely does cash flow. And if I just make a copy so I don't override this, we can quickly just put this into the spreadsheet. All right. So this was about 156. And we're assuming we can rent this out. Interest rate, yeah, this is way higher now. Even though it's coming down. So I'll just put 7%, about 1,400 or so we could rent it out for. This is very crude way of going about it because, of course, I have to kind of dive deeper into the vacancy of the area and things like that. But off the bat, if I look cash on cash, it's probably something I'm missing here because it's definitely not negative 44%. Interest rate. Did I have, no, the units is 1. I think I answered everything in correctly. Oh, my expenses are property tax. Yeah, it's going to be a little more complicated. So I have to get the property taxes, which I think Zillow ended up taking that out. They used to have a breakdown where you would go here and it would do like a better breakdown of property taxes. All right, so let's just assume it's close to the 1% rule, probably does cash flow to an extent. So now that we're going into the next phase, which is value add opportunities, what value can we add to this property? Well, from what we could see from that other comparable that we saw, the kitchen was a little bit more remodeled. And this one, I think, was going for 1,400, right? 1,400. It looks like all those that are nearing towards the right-hand side, the kitchen's a little bit more updated, even though this one isn't. Maybe we could paint the cabinets and really command that $1,400 a month for rent. So that could be something that we do for this property. Potential risks. I don't know the area too much in terms of, well, actually, excuse me, I do know the area enough to know that it's definitely prone to hurricanes. So if we go into a street view here, which I think I can do from this view, or possibly not. So I'm just going to copy this. I want to go into the Google Maps Street View where I can get information on different attributes. So let's go here. Cool. All right, so zooming out again on a high level, we could see we're at the bottom end of Louisiana. So this can be prone to hurricanes here. Oh, New Orleans is down here. My apologies. So New Orleans is towards the bottom right-hand side. Baton Rouge is around here. I think there's a lot of like engineering companies that are around here as well. So that could be good potentially if they're staying around this area. I do see some sort of shaded part. So if we go down, that is indeed an airport. And this looks to be really close. We could just put this in here really quickly, actually see how close it is. Baton Rouge Airport. "13-minute drive." Yeah, this is awesome. So really close. Seems to be a university here too, near some highways. But you're kind of getting that escape because it seems to be like at the end of a street and right by a trail. So I like that. Then looking at what could be some warning signs. I mean, it looks like it's probably a pretty quiet area, so that's good. Looks like there's some sort of train tracks as well on the left-hand side. Library and such. Let's see if I go in here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So let's try to dive a little bit more about Baton Rouge because I know nothing about this area. So if I go back to here and I change this, recopy my script, and I'm going to put here instead Baton Rouge. And I want to do a correction as well. New developments. Think of new big projects for the city. Let me move this mic for a sec. Projects for the city, not just housing developments. Great. And then let's try to get a little bit of an overview of this area. And also, fun fact, I love to use Reddit as well. So let's put here, Reddit have to stay in, what's it called? Rouge. Probably spelled that wrong, Louisiana, for a couple of days. Where do I stay? I look for articles in the last, or threads in the last like 18 months or 12 months. So my wife and I are coming down for our anniversary. We're planning to go to the mall. That sounds fun. What is the safest area to stay in? I'm looking at the Holiday Inn, some other stuff. When I was a kid, it wasn't as good, but it has gotten better. So that's good to know. There might be some not so good areas. You could see Renaissance. It's much nicer now. So let's go back to, I think we had a map previously and see how far this is from Renaissance. It's probably like a neighborhood name though. I want to get like an actual address, or maybe he meant like the Renaissance Hotel. Say at Renaissance. Yeah, maybe he did. At Renaissance. Yeah, it seems like at a place. All right, so it seems like this downtown area is where most people stay. Most people feel safe. I like to kind of know what else they have here. Mall's kind of a ghost town. It worries me a little bit because even if there's a lot of like people that go for work here, but if it's like people don't really travel here and there's a lot of things empty, like, well, this person's saying not many empty storefronts. Only saw one that was empty. Confused why so many people were there. That could be good. All right. Stay away from Segan. 10 people have liked this. So what is Segan? Let's see. Segan Care Car Center is probably like a better address I could use, but I'm just going to throw that in there for right now. If we had this area loaded in with for coffee closers, we could pull the maps and actually grade these. But for right now, we could see Siegen might be a neighborhood that's towards the bottom of Baton Rouge, which just looks good for our property that's not by here. And sometimes we could get this map as well from Niche, even though Niche is coming from a different perspective because it's not for investors. But let's see here. Yeah. Well, then, yeah, this is not from the investor perspective, but this is kind of making me think that what the person said previously here, that this Renaissance area is likely pretty good, or this hotel, where this hotel sits, the area is pretty good. A lot of people who are visiting Baton Rouge usually stay really close to the airport. Now, how many people are staying north of the airport? I'm not really sure. But overall, I like the location, that it's not in the southern part that seems to be maybe somewhere to stay away from. And it looks to be a little bit secluded, again, with that park that's right there. I'd be concerned if this river ever overflows. So if we type in or take this address, we go back to FEMA, type in the address here. Might need to zoom in a little bit more. Yeah. So it looks to be says special flood hazard areas without base flood elevation. This property might be like, yeah, it looks like it's one of those that's like right on this cusp. So it's kind of lucky in that you may not have to pay flood insurance because it just misses it. But with the way the world changes, who knows, in a couple years, it might actually fit into the flood zone. So it's definitely a warning, but it likely is a little bit more elevated. But there could potentially be flooding like around it if, yeah, there's like a storm. So this property was also let's see what year it was built. It was built in 1978. So there'll likely be some information that you could gather if there was flooding in the past. So that's something that I would mental note. All right, so we just talked about property financials. We use Zillow to be able to get some of those comps. Value add opportunities. There wasn't any in terms of like adding a bedroom. Maybe we could do that whole, rent out part of the parking. Not as much traction there. Improvements, yes, we could maybe paint the kitchen cabinets to kind of be similar towards those comps that were a little bit higher valued. Then going to potential risks. It's not in a flood zone, but it's really, really close to that flood zone area in the map. So we would want to know if there has been any issues in the past. Other risks, structural, we didn't see any initially from the photos. Location also looked quiet, which was good. Hold exit strategies, aside from long-term rental, which it's almost 1% cash on cash. So that is awesome, probably does cash flow as a long-term rental. But also, with it being really close to the airport, it could potentially be a good short-term rental or medium-term rental. And I realized I just completely blew past this area as well. But if we wanted to learn more about some market research of Baton Rouge, we could see overall the properties are around 285K, which this one fell a lot lower than that. Curious why it's been on the market for 90 days too. It's kind of a long time. I had to assume the roof hasn't been repaired in a while and some other capital X expenses. Top employers for the state. Oh yeah, Louisiana State University, which contributes a lot to their economy. ExxonMobil, top refinery. Interesting. Schools, so yes, heavy presence of colleges, and climate risks, which I love that it pulled this initially. So 97% of properties are at extreme risk of hurricane-related wind events as well. Cool. And then when it comes to major projects, Water Campus, a global hub for coastal protection and restoration research. Yeah, because I have someone in my network who they're like a structural engineer, and they do a lot of work trips over here to Baton Rouge. So I'd assume that this could potentially be a good area for like someone who's staying for 3 months doing a project and doesn't want to be in downtown to save costs or for their company, but wants to be a little bit farther. So potential strategy and mixed use developments, which we could always dive deeper into to see where this is. Hopefully, that was not too confusing as I was going through all of these. But the main goal that I want you to take away from here is that analyzing a property doesn't have to be a black box, right? You can follow a systematized approach of going through each of these quadrants to be able to understand the property itself and the area. And if we were to go towards that last piece here, is this deal newbie friendly? I'd say probably not because if I had to guess, there's a lot of CapEx expenses with the limited amount of photos, long time on market. But is it worth making an offer on? I think probably yes. It cash flows, looks to be in a decent area, and looks to be multiple exit strategies. However, I would caution if someone's doing this as a newbie, because of that flooding, you would really want to check if there has been any flood damage in the past to that property. Would I invest in the deal? But I would need to do more research on the city itself, the population, the trends of where it's going. But I think from my previous dashboard, which I think I could pull up here quickly. Yeah, had it here. I think there was like population decrease in the area. So if I go to population year over year, yeah. And let me just filter to the state of Louisiana, which this is built off of Tableau. For those that are also in the data analytics space, you could build dashboards on Tableau for free, even though if you want to like basically only use it internally, then you do have to pay. So yeah, the red basically means population decrease, blue means population increase. And from what we see, there is population decrease in these areas from the years of 2021 to 2022, which take that for a grain of salt because that is a little bit dated. So the next level is going to here, Baton Rouge, Redfin, housing stats, because Redfin has a little bit more real-time data. So if we look at their migration trends, I think they have somewhere where they say where they get this. Yeah, so they're not measuring like who physically moved, who took a UPS truck or shifted their address. They're looking at eyeballs mostly for properties, but they're doing this in a very systematic way. So we could see a lot of people are moving to Baton Rouge from different areas of the country. Usually most people are actually just kind of staying within Louisiana and moving there. And if they're leaving, they're kind of staying local. But this net inflow is pretty low. Like if I went back to Orlando, we could see here like the net inflow is a lot higher, like higher numbers. And it just could be that Baton Rouge is a smaller city. But yeah, that's my analysis for this area. I would likely not invest in a deal because of these population trends that I'm seeing. But for someone else who may have more on the boots ground knowledge of what's coming in the area, the type of tenants, this could still potentially be a great deal. All right, so with that, I know I've kind of breezed through these really quickly. If you want to know more information, you can go to this previous video that I did, which was stop using spreadsheets. And I went through an example similar to this in a very slow and systematic way too. Now, when it comes for next time, so next week, I do plan to do these lives every single week on Thursdays, but for them to be very practical. So the next one will be from Rex. Oh, and I realized from the comments, I realized I didn't actually scroll down. There were a lot more comments. My bad. Is it? Oh, that's actually a great question before I conclude. Would you go to a crime map website of their local state? So yeah, I think crime is a really interesting topic because it's useful, but it doesn't always tell the full story, right? So if we go to, say, crime map here, map.org, I think it is, right? No. So crime map, and I'll just put New York City. It should be one of the first ones. Thought it was crimemap.org. This is actually built by someone from New York. Crime grade, that's what it is. Crime grade, browse cities, and I'm just going to go to New York because this is going to kind of play into my reasoning behind this. Is that, for one, a lot of this data is a little bit dated. And if we look at New York City and Jersey City and Hoboken, all this, it's straight red, which would tell you never invest anywhere in these areas, which is not true, right? Like, people live in New York, people have, $100,000 plus jobs here. This doesn't tell the full picture. So I think, at least for myself, I dive into crime at that second phase. Like, now I've screened the property, I throw an offer, I now get the offer accepted. Now I'm having my agent or myself walk through the property, different times of the day, see if anyone's hanging out, meaning like it's 1 p.m., people are on a stoop, they should be working, right? So that is something that's a little bit worrisome. And I don't actually go into these details as much of, like, did an assault happen on the corner of X, Y, and Z? Like, that's not enough information to tell me, are people leaving? Are they taking good jobs with them? Are they leaving without anyone replacing those properties? Is vacancy going up? I feel like those metrics can paint a lot better of a picture. So my suggestion is to look at crime once you've already have an offer that's accepted. Hope that answers the question. Thank you all so much. Next week, we'll have Rex going through a live stream for creative deal analysis. So a little bit separate of what I've done today, actually walking through a deal he's done. I want these to be super practical so that we're actually going through numbers and not just talking about deals. We're getting the questions that you have answered. So with that, thank you all so much. And